momentarily you'll hear from Ted Cruz. We know there's a setup, and we'll go with him to talk about this because we are on the cusp of quite a shootout that just ended up happening between Rand Paul and Governor Christie around the direction of the party. We heard from Peter King today, who was more in the Christie camp, about all these stories of Rand Paul talking about privacy, liberty, individual rights, the Constitution. So let's go right now, and excited to bring him to you, Senator Ted Cruz here on the Steve Malzberg program. Hey, Senator, thank you very much. Pleasure to speak with you today.
Dom, it's terrific to have the chance to join you.
Well, Senator, we played the cut. Now, I don't know which one to play. You take shots from everybody, which means I think you're doing something right. I'm from Philadelphia, as you know. Chris Matthews is from, we know each other pretty well, but a long time ago, he went off the reservation. What do you think of being called now a political terrorist on top of everything else?
Well, I think my favorite comment on that was someone on Twitter who suggested an ironclad rule going forward that anyone who calls a political opponent a terrorist should forever be prohibited from accusing anyone of demagoguery.
I think that should work, absolutely. I've seen publicly, too, and I think this would be a good pay-per-view, would like to debate Karl Rove, and we want to break down, because this is where we really get into intense policy, on the issue of defunding Obamacare. We've heard from some of your colleagues, and I think we're pretty much in unison, that this is our last best chance. Rove, as you know, though, Senator, says this would be a huge error for Republicans. We would get tarred with shutting down the government here.
Well, I think there are an awful lot of Republicans in Washington who are scared of President Obama blaming Republicans for any government shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
And they are haunted by ghosts of shutdown past. However, that fear and trepidation should not prevent us from taking our best and I believe our last real opportunity to actually defeat Obamacare. And for all of those Republicans who in good faith are nervous about proceeding down this path, I would suggest two very simple points. Number one, on January 1st of next year, the exchanges and the subsidies will kick in. The Obama administration's plan is very simple. It is to get as many Americans as possible addicted to the subsidies, addicted to the sugar, because they know the simple fact that in modern times, no major entitlement has ever gone into effect and then been undone.
Exactly.
And so they just want as many people receiving subsidies, because once that happens, I believe it is likely that Obamacare will become a permanent feature of our economy. Now, if that's right, and I believe it's right, and I have not heard anyone make a credible argument to the contrary, it leads to the second point and the critical point that I would encourage folks to ask any Republicans who are nervous about using the continuing resolution as the leverage to finally and successfully defund Obamacare. The second point is this, the simple question: what is the alternative? And there is no Republican alternative. Now you get some folks who say things like, well, we ought to delay the individual mandate. We ought to strip the IRS of enforcement power. They come up with sort of all sorts of partial solutions. But here's the critical point, Dom. If any of those partial solutions are passed as standalone legislation, I mean, the House could pass, say, eliminating the individual mandate. It doesn't matter, because Harry Reid and the Senate are not going to take it up.
Exactly.
So passing any of those partial measures is purely a symbolic gesture. It's essentially a press release. It has no chance of succeeding. The only thing that has a chance of succeeding, and nobody's presented any alternative at all, the only thing that has a chance of succeeding is if we can get 41 Republicans in the Senate or 218 Republicans in the House to stand together and say, we will not fund government, we will not fund a continuing resolution that funds one penny of Obamacare. We will fund everything else in government, But enough is enough. This isn't working. It's failing. There's bipartisan agreement. The American people agree, and we're going to stand up and stop it.
Senator, I want to say, too, your tone, having you now actually being able to talk with you versus how you're portrayed out there, that you're running around the halls saying, you're a surrender lobby, I'm a wacko bird if you don't do what I want. I think you've just said a lot of these guys are of good faith, but they're a bit timid. They're a bit the ghost of Christmas past, and we're trying to lead them. We're not trying to bludgeon them, but we're trying to tell them this is legitimately the last chance. I like what Mike Lee, your colleague, has said, that is, if you don't vote to defund this, then you're going to own it. You will have ownership of it.
That is exactly right. And to make this happen, we've got to do a couple of things that have not happened before. Number one, the usual rules of Washington. If they apply, we can't win. If the forum for persuasion is the closed-door meeting rooms of Washington, the smoke-filled rooms of elected representatives and lobbyists, we will never prevail on this fight. In order to prevail, the only thing that can win this fight is if the American people get motivated, engaged, and mobilized at historic levels. It's the reason this week a national website was launched, don'tfundit.com, don'tfundit.com. In 4 or 5 days, we've had 125,000 people sign up on the national petition. If we see in the next 60 days, between now and September 30th, hundreds of thousands, or even better, millions of Americans engage, sign the national petition at don'tfundit.com, and call their elected representatives and their elected senators, light up the phones. Nothing gets the attention of an elected representative more than hearing from their constituents and encouraging our elected representatives to do the right thing, as you said, inspiring them to stand up and fight this fight. That's number one. We've got to mobilize the American people. And then number two, we've got to win the argument. The way this will play out procedurally, I believe it should start with the House of Representatives passing a continuing resolution that funds the entirety of the government, every bit of the government,
right,
except for Obamacare, and that explicitly prohibits any government spending on Obamacare, both discretionary and mandatory, and I filed statutory language that I think should be attached to the continuing resolution. The next step is President Obama and Harry Reid predictably will scream and yell that the mean, nasty Republicans are threatening to shut down the government. And at that point, we've got to stand up and win the argument and go to the American people and say, no, we have voted to fund the government. We want to keep the government open. Why is Barack Obama threatening to shut down the government? Barack Obama has already granted waivers from Obamacare to giant corporations. Why is President Obama threatening to shut down the federal government to deny those very same waivers to hardworking American people?
Exactly. And my take on it with guys like Ted Cruz and a few others there, that argument can be made. We're not going to be in the negativity camp of Mr. Rove and others. Just hearing you, interacting with you, the argument is there. We know it in our heart, and this is the last best chance. This is not a wild Hail Mary. This is a legitimate argument that can be won.
That is exactly right, and it's interesting. Many old hands in Washington, they operate from the assumption that, well, if the House does this, the president will naturally force a shutdown. And now it's worth noting that any shutdown is not. I think shutdown's a misnomer. What it in fact is a partial, temporary shutdown, because Social Security checks continue to flow, the military continues to be paid, the national debt continues to be serviced. If there's no continuing resolution in effect, what happens is non-essential government functions are temporarily suspended. Now that's inconvenient, but we actually see that every single week on the weekend.
Yep, and Senator, we're about ready to be suspended. I can't thank you enough. I'm sorry we're both flat out of time on today's show, but give that website one more time. Don'tfundit.com, don'tfundit.com. Sign the petition, call your representative, and get 10 of your friends to do the same. Senator, thank you very much. To be continued. Thanks, Senator.
Thank you, Dom. God bless you.